Hi, everyone. Congressman Emmer here, and welcome to my first online town hall. I'm currently sitting in my DC office on the 5th floor of the Cannon office building, and I'm excited to have you here with me today. For the past few days, we've been asking people to send in their questions through Facebook, Twitter, and my website. And I wanted to ask, I wanted you to ask me anything. We've got an extremely wide variety of topics. We'll answer as many of the questions as we can get to, but please continue to send your questions. And by the way, to ask a question at any point, you can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/RepTomEmmer, or you can tweet at RepTomEmmer on Twitter with the hashtag AskTom, or visit emmer.house.gov/AskTom and fill out the form. If we run out of time today, keep checking back. I answer Minnesotans' questions each week during our weekly video updates. Now, before we get to your questions, I want to give you a brief update on what's going on here at the nation's capital. We're in the middle of appropriations season, and we've got votes on defense authorization bills and protecting states' rights as it pertains to waterways. That's all on my end. Let's get to your questions. Again, please keep sending them on Facebook, Twitter, and our website. All right. First, we got Arab from Avon. This was via our website. And Arab's question is, do you support having clean water and clean air for Minnesota and all the other states? Thinking long-term, Arab adds, wouldn't it be prudent and reasonable to expect you not to support House File 2042, the Ratepayer Protection Act, but instead to support the EPA's Clean Power Plan? First, Arab, all of us, I believe, wants clean air and water. We just have maybe some different perspectives as how to get there. I think at the end of the day, this is about being good stewards of the Earth's resources and making sure that we leave our environment in as good, at least a good, and hopefully a better condition than we found it. As for the EPA's Clean Power Plan, no, I don't support the EPA's Clean Power Plan. I think the EPA is a little overwhelming when it comes to regulations and requirements. Frankly, the Clean Power Plan does not take into account the advances that Minnesota has already made. In fact, I believe Minnesota is being unfairly treated by the EPA's proposal by requiring us to meet certain objectives without taking into account that we've already done more than most other states. And it's not that our work is done. It's just give us credit for the things that we've already done and allow us to actually continue to provide inexpensive and frankly very efficient energy sources for our population. Next, we have Steve from Delano via Facebook. Steve's question, very simply put, what is being done about Obamacare? I'm going to grab a little coffee. Steve, Obamacare, first off, I voted for the repeal. Second, I voted for a budget that will effectively end Obamacare if all of its pieces get put together. And I guess we're continuing to work on our solutions, trying to allow people more opportunity to make their own choices when it comes to their healthcare decisions. In other words, to be able to tailor policies to our needs as opposed to being required to buy coverages that we may not need and may not be appropriate for us or our families, allowing us to pool, giving small employers the same ability to pool as large corporations now have for purposes of getting discounts on healthcare insurance and other things like purchasing across state lines. Let's see. Oh, we've got a follow-up from Paul S. via our website. Why does Congress get to have Cadillac health coverage, but the common person has to have Obamacare or MNsure shoved down our throats? Paul, first I have to thank you for the question. Second, I have to say your information is incorrect. Congress does not get Cadillac health care. In fact, Congress is under the same Obamacare program as everybody else. I will just tell you that personally, I think it's frankly not a good program. We spend more, it costs us more for less coverage. I didn't even take it. My wife and I, our family is covered under a different program that we do privately outside of here because I was not pleased with the program at all. And we can certainly talk about that more if you're interested. Robert via Twitter, what can be done to curtail extremist recruitment in Minnesota? Robert, that's a great question. I will tell you that what I've learned since I've been here is the typical individual that is susceptible or is the target of these radicals that are the extremists that want to recruit them. Typically, although this isn't limited because we've seen reports of females that have been trying to make the trip back to join some of these groups, it's typically males the ages 15 to 35 who are disengaged, who don't have hope, don't feel they have an opportunity. They are the ones that are susceptible, frankly, not just to the extremists that are trying to recruit them from overseas, but also to gang activity. Really, how do you deal with it? Well, you got to make sure that they're engaged. You've got to make sure that these people have hope and see opportunity that gives them a sense of community so that they want to be productive and law-abiding citizens. Part of that is making sure that we welcome them to our community, and we try to make sure that they recognize that we're friends and not enemies. Ben, via Twitter, does TPA, and I'm just going to add this, the Trade Promotion Authority, negotiate away treaty approval requirement or just support the negotiations saying Congress will vote on the package? It's the latter, Ben. I mean, that's a great question when you think about it. For those of you that study the Constitution, like I like to, Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress and Congress alone shall have the authority or the sole authority to enter into agreements with foreign nations, treaties, trade agreements, and the like. The executive can actually negotiate on anything all day long. But if the executive is going to enter into an agreement, a trade agreement, then it would be up to Congress to ultimately approve or ratify that agreement in order to make it binding. Now, I want to go a little bit farther with this question because this issue has gotten so much attention and misinformation, quite frankly. You have to understand, and I think, Ben, you do understand based on your question, but I don't think a lot of people understand the Trade Promotion Authority is actually what used to be called fast track. It's no longer called fast track by those that support it because, frankly, fast track suggests that Washington is actually going around the rules and trying to pull a fast one. Quite the contrary here. In fact, Trade Promotion Authority is Congress actually exercising its authority over trade and holding that authority. In other words, if we pass this legislation, and I would suggest that anyone who's watching and interested read the Trade Promotion Authority legislation. It's only 113 pages. What it does is it lays out the do's and don'ts for the executive branch that's already negotiating trade deals. It says this is what the expectations are from Congress. When it comes to communication, it requires them to be transparent, to provide not only communication as to the ongoing negotiations so that Congress can be apprised of what's being negotiated and can be involved in the negotiations where necessary, but it has a specific requirement that any final agreement before there can be a vote by Congress must be published on the website and otherwise available to anyone who wants to read it and understand what's in it at least 60 days before any vote, so it can actually be longer. The purpose is to have transparency, full disclosure, and frankly, to make sure that Congress is fully apprised of the entire deal. Because at the end of the day, what Congress is agreeing to do, which makes sense, is they're saying, go ahead and negotiate the deal under these parameters. If you meet these benchmarks of communication and make sure that the things that we expect are in it are there and the things that we are telling you can't be and aren't there, then we will bring it to the floor and we will have a vote, yes or no. Why is that important? Because if you were going to have an amendment process, people who are negotiating these deals wouldn't make the deals because, frankly, the deal that they'd be giving up something for could be changed. So as a common sense, when it comes to negotiating agreements, once you negotiate agreement on behalf of your principal, you want to know that's going to be the agreement that's either accepted or rejected. And if it's rejected, so be it. Then you will go back to the drawing table and start all over again. But in this case, Trade Promotion Authority is simply Congress exercising its constitutional right over trade. We'll be taking questions throughout this town hall. I think I said that when we began. So if you want to ask a question, tweet to me at Rep. Tom Emmer with the hashtag AskTom, or submit a question on our Facebook page or on our website at emmer.house.gov/asktom. Now, we have Michael from St. Cloud via Facebook. Is there any plan to reform the H-1B visa program? And the answer is yes. H-1B visas are for long-term, high-skilled workers, and we're trying to not only expand it, but we're trying to reform it so that we can help doctors and seasonal workers. We've got a lot of doctors who are prepared to work in some of our rural hospitals, but they can't get their visas approved, and that needs to be addressed. All kinds of things are going on, which, again, it's going to depend on what happens with some of this other legislation that's up right now. Jared in St. Cloud. The list of transportation needs within the St. Cloud area continues to grow from an aging infrastructure to increasing mobility and safety needs. What efforts are you and Congress taking to ensure transportation funds will be available to address the ever-increasing list of needs? This is a great question, Jared. I think in the long term, when it comes to transportation and other issues that, frankly, need to be addressed at a state level, we're going to need to see a renaissance of federalism. What does that mean? Well, it means that even though Congress, our federal government, will always have some involvement, we need to give the states more ability to keep more of their money at home and have more flexibility for the local authorities to be able to address needs that are most important to the local population, as opposed to what we have now, which is you send money to Washington, Washington then redistributes it and uses the Highway Trust Fund as to accomplish that purpose. Why do I think that that's going to be necessary? Because on average, for every dollar, and this isn't just transportation, this is across the board, so all accounts, for every dollar that we Minnesotans send to this place, Washington, D.C., we see back about 74 cents. We are a net contributor as opposed to a net recipient. Now, I think the fair thing would be for every dollar you send, you see a dollar back, but that's not what's happening. So the more money we can keep at home, the more we can empower local officials to make the transportation decisions that are necessary. I think the better off we're going to be in the long run. In the meantime, I think what we have to focus on, and this is what we're doing here, is the Highway Trust Fund and make sure that it goes back to doing what it was originally designed to do. What's that? Well, the Highway Trust Fund was created in the 1950s, and it had an interesting concept. The concept was a user fee. Create an interstate highway system in this country using a 3-cent gas tax. And the highway system, by some accounts, was completed in the early 90s. Now, it requires updates, it requires maintenance, always requires improvements. And what has happened over time is rather than just having that focused on roads and bridges, which was the intent, it started to focus on roads and bridges, transit, bike trails, light rail, all kinds of other things in addition to highways and bridges. Now, all of those are important too, but why I tell you this is because if you look at the Highway Trust Fund today, if it would just go back to its original stated purpose of funding highways and bridges, it would be fully funded for the next 10 years. That would do a lot towards making sure there is a a regular and reliable resources for road and bridge construction, maintenance, improvement, and new construction. Then we just need to look for other resources in terms of to address the transit needs. But in the meantime, we would be addressing some of our most important needs when it comes to roads and bridges. Next, we have Janet from Clear Lake via Facebook. Janet writes, GMO crops have been linked with the cancer-causing agent glyphosate found in Roundup pesticide. Do you think American consumers have a right to know if they're putting harmful substances in their bodies? Where do you stand on GMO labeling? Janet, first, I think we have a right to know whatever it is we're eating and consuming, where it came from and what's in it. But when it comes to GMO labeling, I favor a federal solution, even though I tend to look at things from a state's rights perspective. When it comes to GMO labeling, I think it should be consistent across all jurisdictions. I don't think we should be looking at a patchwork of different rules in each state where different providers are providing food. So I do think it's going to have to come from Congress. And I can tell you that there's a proposal in the House right now that I expect will be moving soon in terms of who's going to have the jurisdiction. Is it the FDA on the one side, or is it going to come out of the USDA on the other side, or will it be a combination of both? I think that's what people are trying to work out right now. But the short answer to your question is yes, I do believe that we should know what we're eating and where it came from and what's in it. And when it comes to GMO labeling, I think Congress is going to have to act on that topic and soon. Next, we have Dolores from St. Francis via our website. Dolores writes, I know you recently traveled to Ethiopia and Kenya. Would you share something that surprised you while you were there, or just something you think we should know? Well, it's more than just something. It was, first off, it was a great experience when you're asked to evaluate policy about how we're doing things. And I'll tell you, I'll give you one example. We have a thing called USAID, which frankly is less than 1% of our overall budget. And what I learned by going to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and to Kenya, we were in Nairobi and Eldoret and one other place in Kenya. What I learned is that something I have been guilty of in the past, probably like a lot of people, is that it is not a zero-sum game when it comes to USAID. What do I mean by that? I have made the statement in the past that $1 that we are spending, for instance, in Africa, in Kenya, is $1 that we could probably be using at home to build a road or a bridge. Well, it's not that simple, because we're interested in a couple of different things, always improving our quality of life here in this country, and that's directly related to the growth of our private economy. Well, we need to have trading partners, both here within our boundaries, our borders, but outside of our borders. Because remember, 90% of the world's future customers actually live outside of the United States. So one, it's making sure that we have markets for our superior products produced by quality labor. We need to make sure that we're constantly growing those markets so that we can realize a return, a valuable return on those products. But the other part of it is our national security. This has a geopolitical application as well. And why do I say that? Well, because the example that I'm going to use hopefully will show you why it's so important. Because here's the choice. Do we spend $1 today to teach someone in Eldoret, Kenya, how to be a member of a dairy co-op? Do we teach them with $1 today how to grow superior feed to increase the cow's milk production so that they can increase their income, so that with that increased income, they can dig a well on their property, which will allow them to expand their operation, and the expanded operation, which draws even more increase in their income, that allows them to send their children to boarding school. Now, I'm not talking hypothetically. This is actually what I saw in Eldoret, Kenya. USAID in Eldoret has helped the local farmers create a dairy co-op, and it has trained the farmers on how to increase milk production through better feed, which is being grown hydroponically. In fact, we met a farmer named Noah and his wife Irene, who, because of the education they've received, the help they've received from USAID, and the increased income that they've realized because of the ability to be a member of a dairy co-op and to have increased milk production, they have been able to put their 3 kids into boarding school. That bodes well for the future, and I guess I look at it this way. $1 spent on that is $1 that we won't have to spend on additional bombs and bullets and, God forbid, boots on the ground in the future. If we can just help these folks raise their quality of life, raise their economic standing. And then when we have trade partners, it's funny, they don't tend to attack each other. So that's what I learned. Kim, via our website, and I think Kim sent me a couple of different questions, but we'll start with this one. We have a really good economy here in St. Cloud and seem to be experiencing some worker shortages. What are some ideas or plans you have to help improve this situation? It's a great question, but the issues, most of the issues, Kim, that you're raising are state issues, but I still find them incredibly interesting, and I think there has to be more coordination between our 4-year colleges, our technical colleges, our employers, and frankly, the community that is looking for work, because we need to make sure that we're providing educational opportunities that actually prepare the people that are paying for this education to go right into the workforce. And we've got a lot of employers, like you say, who are desperate, who are hungry for skilled workers, workers who are not only skilled, but reliable, who are looking for good work, good paying jobs, and who are willing to show up on time and work hard. I think by creating that type of a partnership, we'll see more of a return in terms of people who are in class, walking out with a diploma or a completion certificate and right into a job. But I think that's going to require some teamwork, and hopefully we've already started seeing it. I can tell you that our employers have been actively approaching the technical colleges and 4-year colleges, trying to create these partnerships. So I think it's at the beginning. And you know what? Where there is a need, it's funny how there will be people who will start showing up to fill that need. Next, we have Sean from St. Cloud. Thanks for holding this town hall, Sean writes. I, like many in Minnesota, am really concerned about an influx of refugees that put a strain on our city and threaten our national security. What can be done to address this situation that everyone can get behind? Well, Sean, it's a great question. But remember, this country was built and frankly continues to grow because of people who have come to this country looking for a better life. Yes, we have refugees that are showing up from different cultures, but I think the best thing that can happen is when you have refugees come into the community, find out who they are, get to know them. Find out what brought them here, what they're interested in. Get to know a little bit about who they are and where they're from. Help them assimilate. Help them become Americans if that's what their goal is. And if it's not, help them be successful so that when they do go back to their home country, they can take that success with them and that friendship, frankly, for the communities here in America so that they can help their home country succeed. I think that frankly, hate breeds hate. We have to be a little bit more understanding in terms of the people that are coming into our communities. We need to figure out how we help those people succeed, because their success, frankly, is what will drive our future success and the safety of our communities. Doug from Buffalo via Facebook writes, okay, so what steps are in place to hold government officials accountable? I think of this Hillary news, and particularly how she could get by for years using her personal email while seemingly conducting official business. Where are the checks and balances? You know what, Doug? You point out something that has bothered me for many years. There seems to be a political elite class, people that hold themselves as above the law, and unfortunately, some of them have been able to skate by. I mean, look at some of the scandals that we have. The IRS with Lois Lerner. We have Hillary Clinton with the email scandal that, quite frankly, could tell us a lot about her responsibility or her actions relating to the Benghazi situation. There's Fast and Furious. There are other things that really we have a obligation to be constantly vigilant. Congress does have oversight, and Congress does hold hearings and try to get the information. Unfortunately, when you have a Republican Congress that is trying to get answers from a Democrat executive branch, it can prove to be very difficult. So I would say two things. One, we have to stay vigilant. We have to keep asking the questions. We have to keep asking for the information in the documents. We can never give up, because if you're going to hold them accountable, you got to make sure that they know that you're not going to go away. The truth has a funny way of finding its way to the light eventually. And then second, I think the 2016 election, presidential election, will have a lot to say about whether we get to the bottom of a lot of these pending and ongoing issues. Scandals may be a little bit dramatic, but I think that we're going to see some big changes if there's a change in the executive office. I think you might see a lot more information come out much quicker. Roger B. via the website, how will we deal with our national debt? Well, Roger, that's a great question. And it's really not that difficult an answer. The question is whether we're going to have the political courage to do what needs to be done. You got to address the spending. You know, my party talks about no new taxes all the time. And I would agree. There's no reason to be raising taxes at this point. The issue, though, is not about taxes. It's about spending. You got to look at what our government at every level, but at this level in particular, think of all the money that is being spent on all the things that government does not need to be involved in. And we can get you a list. Their colleagues here in Congress have put out their own lists. You could find Tom Coburn's, for instance, his report on waste, his annual report. In fact, I think another version from a different representative senator just came out within the last few days. It starts with the spending. And then you've got to grow your private economy. Remember, the public environment, it doesn't grow wealth. It takes wealth. You got to reduce regulations at every level. You got to streamline the regulations. You can't, for instance, require somebody to go to 5 different government agencies to get permits when it comes to the use of water in their community. You got to streamline the regulation process. You got to reduce the burdens on entrepreneurs, and that's typically taxes. You got to reduce taxes, and you got to have a strong dollar. Funny, we've done this before in this country, and we can do it again. Yes, we do have economic growth right now, and a lot of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to point to we're in this recovery, but it could be so much better. You have to grow your private economy, and you have to control your spending. You do those things, you can right this ship very quickly, and we better get on top of it now. Because if we don't, we're just passing it on to the future generation. Frankly, we've got a moral responsibility not to leave this for our children and grandchildren. Jacob from Otsego writes, besides trade, what are some of your goals for the next 2 years? Well, Jacob, I'll tell you, the #1 goal I've had since I got here, this seat belongs to Minnesota. We have 8 congressional seats and we have 2 U.S. Senate seats that don't belong to the people that have the election certificates in them. It's been entrusted to us, but we work for you. This seat belongs to you. So what am I doing? Excuse me, in this 2 years, my job is to build relationships. I came here back in January. What I've done is try to get to know everybody who's here. Try to build relationships so that when you have an issue, when you call this congressional office because you need something addressed that is important to you personally, may be important to the community, might be important to a business interest in the community, we can actually make something happen. We'll know who to send you to. We'll know how to facilitate a resolution of whatever that problem is. My job right now is to make sure that we build those relationships so that we build that influence for the future, so that when you need help from Congress, we're here to give it to you. Ed on Twitter, where do you stand on the gas tax? That's a great question, Ed. The question is, though, are you talking about a federal gas tax or a state gas tax? Because I do not support a federal gas tax. And I think in answering a question earlier, I talked about how for every dollar that Minnesota sends to Washington, D.C., we get back about 74 cents. If the gas tax is part of a solution, and again, I think it's about the spending. I think if you address your priorities and you address the spending and make sure that you fund your priorities, you don't need to be raising additional revenues. The problem that you have is government seems to believe that it doesn't have to look within. It doesn't have to look for more efficiencies. It doesn't have to eliminate redundancies and duplications of effort. It just needs more money. So first off, I think you got to start looking at those reforms. And now is a great time, by the way, as we start to have our government employees as they start to retire, because a lot of our upper management, middle management folks have hit their 50s, and they'll be hitting retirement age in the not too distant future. As they move on, it's a great opportunity at every level for us to start working on reforming and maybe eliminating some of the duplications, some of the redundancies that we have in government. But in the meantime, I don't believe raising a federal gas tax solves the problem for Minnesota. Frankly, it just exacerbates it, because you're suggesting that we should raise a federal gas tax so that we could send more dollars and get back less. I don't think that's the right answer for Minnesota. Again, when it comes to highways and bridges, when it comes to transportation, let's focus on making sure the Highway Trust Fund does what it was originally intended to do: builds roads and bridges and repairs roads and bridges. Katie from Ramsey writes, I heard you also recently got back from Asia. Where did you travel and how does that tie to Minnesota? Well, thank you, Katie. I did. I was in Saigon, which is now known as Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi in Vietnam. And then I was in Hong Kong, and it relates to Minnesota and this country because, again, trade and other business relationships. China, by the way, is a $2 billion export business to the state of Minnesota. It's incredibly important to our business community. In Vietnam, if there is going to be a trade agreement that's negotiated with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Vietnam stands to be in line to have huge economic growth and the ability to become a very good trade partner with the United States and hopefully with the state of Minnesota. That's why I visited, and that's frankly, though, it was more than that, because while we were there, we talked about the human rights issues. Keep in mind that these trade relationships give us the opportunity to export our values, give us the opportunity to try and help populations in these other countries where they don't have the same rights, try to open them up so that they can have more religious tolerance, so they can have more rights for workers, etc. Frankly, there's a whole bunch of different aspects. And then when it came to Vietnam, we were there at a very interesting time, since it was the 40th anniversary of the reunification of North and South Vietnam. It was also, I believe, the 20-year anniversary of the renewed relations between Vietnam and the United States. But all in all, the trip was about a trade relationship between the United States, Vietnam, and Hong Kong, China, as it relates not only to the country in general, but to Minnesota specifically. Dana from Andover, via the website, a personal question. Why are you there? What made you want to be a representative? Dana, it's a great question. You know, life has many interesting twists and turns, I'm with my wife, Jackie. We've been raising this great family, running a business and enjoying life. And one day my wife suggested that I should run for the Minnesota House of Representatives because I was complaining about some of the things that, well, I thought there was a disconnect. I was coming home and I was telling my wife that these guys in St. Paul and even the people in Washington, D.C., they don't understand the things that we're dealing with every day here in Delano, Minnesota. And in so many words, Jackie said to me, "You're the guy who says if you're not willing to be part of the solution, you really shouldn't be complaining." So I ended up running for the state house. I served there while running my business and then had an amazing opportunity to run statewide in Minnesota. It didn't work out the way we thought it was going to, but it really reassured me that I wasn't alone. You know, I'd served 3 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I think I'd reached a point where I wondered if I was the only one in the legislature who felt the way I did. You know, you're telling people we're putting too many burdens on people. We're putting too many requirements on them. We're frustrating their ability to make the decisions that they see best for their family, for their opportunities. And I was hearing back that you have to do this. You know, government's got to do this. We got to make sure we protect these people. This is for their own good. You know, after a while, when you're not hearing anything back, you wonder, are you the only one? And I had a chance to travel the state of Minnesota and recognize that there are more people on main streets all across the state of Minnesota who see it the same way I do than there are in the Minnesota legislature. It was just reassuring. And when things didn't go the way we actually had thought they were going to, and I went off into a kind of a new direction. It was an interesting direction, doing a radio show for a couple of years. I pretty much decided that we were done with public service. And then all of a sudden, my predecessor in this job announced that she was retiring at the end of her term, and I felt called to do it again. Why? Because, back to your question, why am I here? Because I think I have something to offer. I think this is about public service. This is about customer service. It's about making sure that we show people there is a different way to do this. You can interact directly with all these new technologies. And I don't know, Dana, if you and I have ever met, but I've talked about this for the last few years, that these technologies, you know, this thing that we're doing here today, where we actually can connect via the technology that's available while I'm here in Washington, about to go over and deal with stuff on the floor and other things. This is what we should do. Be accountable, be directly accountable, be in contact directly. That's why I think I'm here, to work for you. We've had additional questions come through on Twitter. I'm just getting a note that's telling me that we've got, somebody has suggested that Trade Promotion Authority is going to give the president more power. I got to make it clear. Please read the Constitution and understand. Well, let me put it to you this way. Those of you that have this misunderstanding that somehow Trade Promotion Authority will give this president more power, it's frankly just the opposite. I would suggest, if you've read about these secret meetings in Honolulu that were taking place with the U.S. Trade Representative and members from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Group. Look, if you don't want any more secret meetings, then you want Trade Promotion Authority. If you want the executive to be not only responsive, but also transparent about what his administration is doing in terms of the negotiations, then you want Trade Promotion Authority. I'll say it one more time. Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress has the sole authority to enter into agreements with foreign nations. The executive can negotiate, and that's exactly what the executive branch has been doing, has been negotiating a deal on Trans-Pacific Partnership, has been negotiating a deal with the European Union. How much do we know about what's in those deals? I'm told that if I request a copy of what they've been working on now, I can see it, but I'm not allowed to take notes. I'm not allowed to tell you what's in it. Why? I think that we need Trade Promotion Authority so that we can outline for the executive This is what we expect. We in Congress expect of you, the executive, if you want us to vote on this deal. You're going to have to communicate with us. You're going to have to publish so that all can see, not just members of Congress, but the public, what's in the agreement. This really doesn't give more power to the executive. It is the Congress exercising its power. And I'll just give you a little warning. I do have concerns about an executive who has shown a propensity to flout the law with the rule of his pen. You know, he wanted immigration reform, and he kept making proposals that were only going to be his proposals. And when Congress wasn't willing to have a one-sided discussion with him, he decided he would just issue the orders himself with his pen. I prefer that Congress be the one that is involved actively the way the legislative process is supposed to work. I'm not in favor of an imperial presidency. That's not what the founders intended in this country. I'd rather prevent the same thing from happening in trade. I'd rather prevent this president from just signing trade agreements, even though they would be extra constitutional, with foreign nations with his pen. I'd rather have Congress have the authority and be responsible for it. So it's not giving more authority to the executive, it's exercising authority by Congress. Nicole from Sauk Rapids. Oh, Nicole. When it comes to hot dish, what are your thoughts on tater tots versus no tater tots? Nicole, I like tater tots. Kenneth from Forest Lake. You've mentioned trips to Africa and Asia. Have you spent much time in Minnesota, or do you plan to in the future? You know, it's a great question, Kenneth, because it sounds like that. I want to tell you, though, the trip to Africa was less than 5 days, all right? It's hard, especially at this age, to make these things as quick as we do, but I've spent a ton of time at home. In fact, that has been the home base for the operation of our congressional office. You may even talk to some of the folks in the district. You'll find out that we've already spent as much or more time in St. Cloud, from St. Cloud to Forest Lake and down to Carver, as anybody has in the district. Granted, we've had some great representation. I've heard stories about Mark Kennedy from years ago that he used to get to things even before the mayor of St. Cloud could get there. We're trying to match that, but that is our priority. Make no mistake, Kenneth. This is not a job where we're going on junkets. We do go on trips when they have a direct relationship to the constituency that we represent. And the two that I've been on have a direct relationship, but they've been short, packed with information and meetings, and they've been probably the smallest sliver of my first, 4 months in Congress, but I appreciate you asking. Sarah from Buffalo, what legislation have you introduced? Do you have plans for new legislation soon? Well, first, Sarah, I will tell you, I have introduced legislation. There are 3 that come to mind right now, but I want to caution you. The measurement of a good representative is not how many new laws he or she can create. I don't think that's the way we measure ourselves. It's how can we facilitate the needs of the constituents that we represent, the customers within the 6th congressional district. And we've already been doing that too. If you have any questions, if you need anything, call our office in Otsego. We got some great people who can take care of birth certificates, who can take care of visas, who can take care of, we actually got someone out of Mongolia who was, frankly, in jail for a tax dispute that involved a corporate matter. He was just being used as the, we'll say, the political pawn. But those are the big things we've been doing. On a legislative front, I offered a bill that would allow Minnesota to access more transportation money on an annual basis if it gets approved. It would allow us to start, much like the Corridors of Commerce program in Minnesota, allows additional monies to be accessed for things like extra lanes on Highway 94. This would allow us to apply for extra funds on an annual basis to improve the safety at our intersections. Along the freeway, along Highway 10, as you know, there's a long railroad corridor that runs next to Highway 10. Those intersections all need work. That's one bill. Another one, we've tried to help our veterans with their medical coverage in the VA with the Veterans Choice Act, making some modifications to that to make it more accessible, to make it more available to more of our veterans. And then most recently, with a representative from New York, we offered some legislation to try and streamline the visa process for medical professionals who are actually trying to enter the country to work in some of our rural hospitals. We're going to have a real need. We already do. It's only going to increase in the coming months and years. The idea is to try and make sure that we can clear these visas on a more efficient basis so that our hospitals can actually provide the care to the local communities that is necessary. And more to come. Mike from Collegeville, I'm graduating soon. Any advice for unemployed 20-somethings? You know, Mike, first off, if you're coming from Collegeville, I know you're already going to be well prepared for whatever is in front of you. But just don't take no for an answer. Think outside the box. You guys are the most talented generation yet. I know because I'm working with a lot of people that are your age or not that much older, and you have skills when it comes to the new technology that a lot of us are really, we have to learn both the old and the new. You have insight. You see things differently than we do. Figure out where it is you want to go, experience life, and just make sure that you always try to make personal connections. I think that I'll give you the last piece of advice because I've had some of this watching my own kids. We now have people applying for jobs online. We don't sit down with them and look them in the eye. We don't size them up as human beings. It's all a resume shot over the internet and a contact. Find ways to get in front of people face to face and sell yourself. And then once you get your foot in the door, never settle for just enough. Always do more than is expected. I think there are a lot of people my age that are underestimating your generation. I think they're looking at the new generation that's coming out, and it's that same attitude, I think, that every older generation has had about the new one. That, oh, they just they want things without working for them, and they don't have the same work habits, etc. You know what? Show them. Show them that you have the new work habits. Show them that you have talents and skills that a lot of us haven't even thought about yet. You'll be successful. We're counting on it. Tom from St. Cloud, how can we trust you after your vote for DHS funding? What are you doing to hold this administration accountable? Well, Tom, I'll stand by my vote for the Department of Homeland Security. The #1 obligation of government at every level is to protect its citizens and their property. And I'm going to tell you, that's the reason we have government in the first place. When it came to the DHS bill, I voted for the original DHS bill, which had the language to defund the president's unconstitutional orders regarding, they call it executive amnesty when it comes to immigration. I voted for that. That didn't get approved through the Senate. You'll have to talk to the leadership in the Senate, but they couldn't get it through the Senate. And at the 11th hour, they sent a Department of Homeland Security bill back to the House without the defunding language for immigration. And I did vote for it. And it's interesting because you have spin groups that suggest a vote for the DHS funding bill that was sent back without the defunding language for the immigration, the executive orders regarding immigration, was somehow a vote in support of the amnesty orders. Absolutely not. In fact, think about it for a second. by defunding or by shutting down the Department of Homeland Security, who is going to enforce immigration. And by the way, before you throw back at me that 85% of the Department of Homeland Security's employees are essential employees, in other words, they would have had to go to work, I want you to think about this for a second. You got a lot of people who are putting their lives on the line for you and me every day. And you're telling me you're going to take the risk if you change places with me. You are willing to take the risk that they will all show up and risk their lives on an IOU. They have young families. They have to pay their mortgages. There will be no absenteeism. I wasn't willing to take that risk. I was actually more interested in making sure that they showed up. The Department of Homeland Security has other issues that we should be addressing, and frankly, I intend to try to address while I'm here. But the bill I had to vote on was a question of, are we going to fund the Department of Homeland Security, or are we going to shut it down? Are we going to protect the Mall of America, or are we going to take a chance that we leave it naked? Are we going to send a message to those that would do us harm that we're open for business, for their business? Again, I stand by that vote. It was the right vote to make. I do think we need to find a way to hold this president accountable for those unconstitutional orders. Right now, it's working its way through the courts, so his orders have been, frankly, made ineffective by a pending injunction. But I'm not willing to trust that in the long run. I think that we need to address, and I think it would have been better to tie that defunding language when it comes to the executive amnesty orders to the education bill, or to an IRS reauthorization bill, or to the EPA's reauthorization bill. And hopefully our leadership here is going to do that. But eventually, if I continue to build our position here, we'll have a say in that. Brianna from Anoka, how does hockey in DC compare to the state of hockey? You know what? There's no place like home, Brianna. I am disappointed that the Wild didn't make it through the last round. I think a lot of people at home are disappointed. But don't count on Washington. These poor guys. I think they've been up 3-1 in more series than anybody else that they've lost. And they were ahead of the Rangers 3-1 not too long ago. And I think they're playing Game 7 tonight in New York. Alex Ovechkin is apparently guaranteed a victory. We'll see how that turns out. Patrick from Blaine, how has your faith guided your politics? You know, I think it starts with the fact that this republic, this constitutional republic, is the first government that was ever created recognizing that you and I, we actually get our rights not from government, but from our creator. And then as a contract, what that Constitution is, we give some of those rights to the state, now a limited amount, to protect us. Granted, it's gone way beyond that. So all I can tell you is that it is a very important part of my life, and it guides my actions every day. Treat people with respect, right? Next, what do we got next? Matthew, what is the most difficult part of your new job? Well, I'll tell you. Probably the most difficult part of my new job is making sure that when I get questions like the Department of Homeland Security question I just got, that rather than react and say, you gotta be kidding, that I actually hear the question, understand. There's a lot of people out there that feel like I do, that are frustrated with the way government has not been responding to them, that feel that we have a president who's been off doing whatever he wants without regard for the Constitution or the rule of law. I understand the frustration, but the hardest part of my job is trying to explain to the people that I work for that, look, our job is not done. This is a generational struggle. We need to stay true to what it is we believe in, and we need to have a goal as to how we're going to get there. In this case, we've got a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, the largest Republican majority since 1928. We have, with the last election, gained control of the United States Senate, but we don't have 60 votes yet. and the leadership in the Senate is not willing to use the nuclear option that Harry Reid was using. But more importantly, we don't have a Republican in the Oval Office. If we are going to complete the job that we've started, then this is not the end of the game. This is just the beginning of the battle. Hold the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. By the way, 50% of the Republican majority is new in just the last 6 years. And more of them are coming here with the same attitude about individuals first. Government is merely a tool. More and more of them have the belief that we are a constitutional republic, and we need to recognize that. And we need to make our decisions in accordance with that. On the Senate side, again, we have to grow that majority. We have to get 60 votes, and then we have to elect a Republican president. You want to solve a lot of these things that we've talked about today. You want more oversight. You want more accountability for the political elite who think they're above the law. You want to make sure that more of these bureaucracies are responsive to people instead of ruling over them. You want to make sure that the IRS, we get to the bottom of what's going on there. You want to see full, comprehensive tax reform. And I'm not talking about tax reform the way my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would talk about it. We're not talking about just creating new revenue streams or rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. We're talking about a flat tax or a fair tax. We're talking about completely overhauling the tax system. You want to start to address these things. You want to address the immigration issue, the violation of what we believe is common sense and, frankly, the rule of law, the Constitution. We got to elect a Republican president to work with the Republican majorities in Congress. You do that, you watch what can happen when it comes to repairing the damage that's been caused by Obamacare, dealing with many of the problems that have been caused by, in many instances, a short-sighted, narrow approach when it came to Dodd-Frank and other one-size-fits-all, top-down federal approaches. We've got to turn more of this back to the states. We got to give people the opportunity to govern themselves closer to the grassroots level. Because remember, the government closest to the person being asked to pay for it is going to be the most responsible and most effective government. Frankly, that's what we've got to do. And the most difficult job for me is to continue to make sure that people who are very frustrated and feel like they are not getting the response that they're asking for understand that this is only the beginning and that, yes, we are working towards these goals. In other words, keep the faith. And thanks for participating. If you have a question that didn't get answered, my apologies. We have limited time. You can contact either of our offices or visit emmer.house.gov/asktom, and I'll try to get to it in one of my weekly videos. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to doing more of these in the future. Have a great afternoon.